Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final part of the most comprehensive goalie draft guide out there. Remember that this is a four-part series, so to learn about every goalie and see the rankings, make sure you check out the other videos and feel free to leave a comment to discuss any goalies or rankings as you see fit. Today's video is centered on the best goalies from the 2025 draft class. These are all guys that have some starter potential and should be drafted to teams who are missing one or two high-end guys. These are the types of goalies that will be the best or second best in their team's pools and are expected to be leaders of the next generation of goalies. Anyways, let's begin with our first goalie at number 8. Samuel Malalo is probably the biggest boomer bust goalie in the draft, save for maybe Semyon Frolov. He's not someone who usually tops the rankings as one of the premier goalies of the class, and there's an understandable reason for that. Malalo is a very erratic goalie. He lacks body control, often moving too much, which makes his job very hard for himself. However, Malaloy is one of the best athletes and skaters, excelling in both quickness and edge work, and is overall a phenomenally proficient mobile goalie. He's also an incredibly intense competitor, and being one of the few draft eligibles to shoulder a legit starter's workload and do quite well is a good sign that he could be a starter in the NHL. While his 900 save percentage isn't flashy, not many his age played in that many games, let alone win that many. He's the type of guy who can show up and be the best player on the ice in any given game, squeaking out with more wins than he probably should have. But he's also had some stinkers, given his erratic nature. But he has some other promising features. His height of 6'3" is framed quite well. He has a highly efficient stance, great for mobility and covering the net. He also has solid enough hands, positioning, and play reading capabilities to be good enough for the league. And while his rebound control is all over the place, he recovers better than most with his quick tracking and athleticism. That being said, I'm still concerned. I see two comparisons here, representing both the boom or bust. Now, I won't sit here and tell you Milosh is as good as Yaroslav Askarov, but stylistically, they're pretty similar. On the bust side, we have Vadim Zarenko of the St. Louis Blues. Askarov is a future franchise goalie and was picked 11th because of it. Zarenko was a very raw prospect, one who was extremely similar to Askarov. He never quite had the same level of talent, but they shared some weaknesses and similar strengths. Big Z was drafted in the 7th because of how raw he was, and while he was promising at a time, it looks like he's soon on his way back to Russia. Malosh lands directly in the middle. He has the potential to be an Askarov light, being a starter in the NHL, or he could fizzle out and never really touch the big leagues. I think with a guy like him, you have to bet on his talent, but the reservations are valid and understandable. Now, you're probably sitting here wondering who is Anders Miller and why on earth is he this high on the list? Well, let me introduce you to my favorite goalie of the draft and biggest sleeper pick. Miller is someone that you won't see ranked highly by anyone else and most likely will be neglected entirely. This is because Miller came into the WHL mid-season, like many others, due to the NCAA merger. He came in tandeming with Daniel Hauser, arguably the best WHL goalie, and they played on a great Calgary Hitman squad. He was very solid for them, but because of the low pressure situation, he still went unnoticed. Another reason why I think he's so overlooked is actually due to his gear. He has small, all white gear from head to toe, and his glove is a little pointier and held higher than normal. I think it's a real thing that goalies can subconsciously get overlooked due to their appearance if they don't fit the usual look, something I've honestly fallen victim to in the past. He's also just generally not a flashy goalie. While he's not small by any means, he doesn't have a huge frame where people can't help but notice. He's a highly technical goalie. Actually, probably one of the best I've scouted over the past couple of years in that regard. He's highly efficient, has great footwork, economical decisions, fantastic positioning, a great stance, good hands, and really good rebound control. He's also a great tracker and play reader. His only real fault in his skill set is having mediocre athleticism. The rest of his problems are more or less mentally related, as in, he could play with more urgency. Often, he's just a little too calm and can be slow getting to places. I think he's a great comparison to Hampton Sukinski and even Carter George, of whom the latter is one of the best goalie prospects in the world. Well, if he's got the same sort of talents and they're at a similar level to George and Slukinski, what's the separation here? Well, it sort of comes down to the situation and the level of experience. George was always a highly touted guy, having a lot of international opportunities, and in his draft year, he was a top goalie in the OHL as a workhorse on a bad team. Kind of just proved early on that he was capable of a heavy workload and showed that he can play at a consistently high level. Miller, on the other hand, hasn't done that. He hasn't gotten the national team recognition due to him not being an NTDP project and hasn't been tested overall. He got some WHL playoff experience, but he was a little shaky, which isn't surprising given his age and lack of facing adversity up to this point. Makes him riskier because he still has to show that he can handle adversity and be a starter. But you know who was risky? Hampton Slukinski. I mean, he was an off the board pick, fourth round, eighth goalie picked, and his highest rank by any major scouting outlet was 223. It's because he played out of high school, but Los Angeles saw the talent and potential and gambled on him. And ever since then, Slukinski has won at every competition possible, becoming USHL Goalie of the Year and champion, NCAA champ, and winning several gold medals as a backup. That gamble is really paying off for LA, and it makes me think that Miller, a similar goalie playing in a actually more reliable situation than Slukinski did, can work out, and he deserves a decent pick. He will follow a similar path as Lukinski because he'll become the starter for Calgary next year with Hauser's departure. And because he's American and held out the WHL only until the merger passed, he likely has a future in the NCAA as well. Burkhood began taking scouts by storm ever since the new year. He was kind of a bit more on the shaky end and had a rocky beginning, but from January to March, he went on an all time heater, stealing countless games, facing an inhumane amount of shots, and still coming out with 1 to 2 goal wins off 35 plus shots 10 or more times in that stretch. His skill set is really well rounded, and he has legit talent in many areas. He's a smart play reader, very positionally sound, has shown to use a very efficient and stable stance, good rebounds, and he has above average quickness, athleticism, and skating. He's also got great size at 6'3", and when he's playing calmly in a good stance, he takes up a lot of net at all times because of his good positioning. It's a good omen that he was in a starting role on a really bad defensive team, carried them to a winning record, and was able to steal so many games. But at the same time, even though his highs were astronomical, the lows were subatomic. He's a highly inconsistent goalie, and when he wasn't stealing games, he was getting mollywopped. It's very evident in his playoff series against Spokane, where he had two amazing games, but was pulled in the other three, letting in a combined 16 goals. He's also someone who went hot is scorching, but if he lets in a few early, he gets rattled and can completely change. He will lose his movement urgency and won't move with enough purpose and intensity, so he will be slower getting somewhere or reacting to the shot. I choose to view his best self, but there were a few games I watched where he seemed like a completely different goalie, playing with a different structure or just not as intelligently. I think overall, he's an extremely talented goalie and he has really good upside, but I wonder if he can translate this type of game to a heavy workload in the NHL. He seems more like a good 1A type of guy who can have an increased workload if he is hot, but would be more effective if he had a reliable partner who could help shelter him. I think it will take time for him to develop, but the upside is huge, and teams likely will probably take him in the third because of it. Petteri Rimpinan is a guy whom I've already made my thoughts well known on this channel. He's a bit of a unicorn. Rimpinan is just a year removed from his draft year and is already arguably the best goalie in one of the best pro leagues in the world. He won Rookie of the Year in Finland's top tier, the Liga, and was a Goalie of the Year finalist, of which he was disgustingly robbed of winning. He's a hyper athletic goalie, second best from this year, a phenomenal skater, and genuinely has a solid technical foundation. I mean, you can't really find as much success as he has already without one. He has decent positioning, but shines in tracking and reading play. He can cognitively keep up with his high paced bodily movements, and it pays off for him in a big way. And especially at the World Juniors, he displayed good stage selection with nice economical movement. I just haven't quite seen that in his Liga play so far, as he has to fight much harder to keep up with the much quicker pace of play. He's an incredible competitor, carrying Finland on his back to a silver medal and carrying Kiekko Espoo to the playoffs. His club was quite a weak team as they were actually in the second tier Finland the year prior. He vastly outperformed all of their goalies to suit up for the squad and stole so many games. There will be concerns with Rimpinen's height, but there have been goalies to play at an elite level in the NHL, like Wolf or Saros, with that kind of size. He's a very projectable goalie because of how erratic he is, but his raw talent is just so immense. And the fact that he's quite literally leagues above everyone else in the draft in terms of level and performance, it makes him a worthy pick with an outside chance of becoming an elite goalie. As he's already in a phenomenal situation, the early experience he will be getting in pro hockey should develop his control and technique to an adequate level for the NHL, if not better than average. Petr Andreanov is a goalie who is a lot like Petteri Rimpinan, but has the edge in technique, age, and intelligence. He's again a hyper athlete, extremely explosive, lightning quick feet, and world class mobility. He zips around the crease like no one's business, and he does so with purpose. He plays at a high pace with urgency, but it's not like he disregards efficiency. He can be surprisingly economical in his movement, taking very smart routes through the crease, and is smart at choosing when to slide, T-push, or shuffle across. It's a bit of a rarity for an aggressive and athletic goalie such as he, but that's what makes him very promising. He also tracks play extremely well, anticipating first and then reacting quickly. A lethal combo with his speed and decision making. His technical foundation is also quite solid. He's a lot more composed than Rippinen, although he still has his moments, has great hands and a good stance. His positioning is fine, but he plays very aggressively, which, yes, he can afford due to his given talents, but it can easily backfire. The NHL used to see highly aggressive goalies in its elite ranks, like Quick and Fleury in their prime, but the league has slowly been shifting away to the calmer positional goalie who controls their depth much better. I don't think it's a major problem, but it can be something that hurts his consistency as he reaches higher levels. The biggest concern I have is his actually lack of rebound control. Russians recently have seemed to generally lack in this area and play a heavy blocking style with little stick and chest control. I especially don't like it on the smaller athletic goalies because they're more prone to freaking out and taking themselves out of position after a rebound. Now, you're probably sitting here ogling his stats. I mean, to say he was dominant was an understatement. But his MHL club is in the silver division, which is a much worse tier of hockey compared to the top gold division. They hardly ever play gold teams. While yes, Andrei Anov played a lot of games, he wasn't tested as much as he faced little adversity and few truly dangerous chances. He displays multitudes of talent, but it will be interesting to see how he can apply it to a legit fast-paced high-level hockey. I believe that Alexei Medvidev is the most well-rounded goalie in the draft. Being a Russian born who played minor and junior hockey in Canada, he's an extremely unique goalie who blends the innate athletic physical talents of Russians with the methodical technical style seen in the majority of Canadians. Like I said, he does just about everything well. He's got quick skating, flexibility, explosiveness, top notch positioning, a perfect and stable stance, good hands, great rebound control, economic movement, and he's very calm and poised. He does struggle along the post with an uncomfortability in an RVH. Not too much of a concern. Doesn't always play with enough urgency despite his athleticism, and is about an average player reader, maybe a little better. He can just sometimes have a mental lapse and slowly react to the play, but his plan execution is flawless when he is anticipating the play. But overall, these are relatively minor when he has so much talent elsewhere that it compensates for his fault. He's also grown through the year to be 6'3", a much more desirable frame for NHL teams. He only has one small problem, and that's his situation. Medvedev played on the London Knights, which was possibly the greatest junior team assembled in my time. He also acted as a tandem goalie with one of the OHL's best netminders in Austin Elliott before becoming the backup for the postseason. It's left him in the ideal situation for a goalie to look good and succeed. He and Elliott faced the lowest quality of shots, the lowest quantity of shots, and because they were rotating, Medvedev never really experienced fatigue in long streaks of games. We've seen a similar situation in a highly touted draft eligible in Scott Ratzlaff back in 2023. He played on the wagon of the Seattle Thunderbirds, tandeming with the WHL Goalie of the Year, Thomas Milic. The following season, Ratzlaff had a lot of growing pains as a starter, but he eventually balanced out. Ratzlaff also fell quite far in the draft, likely due to his height and his situation, and his initial growing pains could be a bit concerning for Medvidev initially. Now, I think Medvedev is much better than Ratzlaff, but still, it's really hard to say how good he can be without having faced legit competition. He will be stepping into the Stars Crease next year, while London will begin the process of rebuilding. Like many, his next year will basically determine his future outlook with the increased role. He has more than enough talent to become an NHL regardless, but if he doesn't handle being the starter on a suboptimal team in the OHL, then he will be more suited as an NHL backup rather than a starter. But he does have immense upside to be a potential high level starter in the NHL. Jack Ivan Kovic, a goalie who has made several appearances on my channel, and this likely won't be the last. The now 6-foot goalie has been hyped to be a premier prospect for years, and while his numbers this year may not have been up to what everyone would have liked, his talents have not disappointed. Ivan Kovic has arguably the most talent in the draft, even more so than Ravensburg, but he falls short because of the large disparity in height, where one could argue that Ravensburg theoretically has more potential to work with, as he can cover far more net and ground. Ivan Kovic's only real weaknesses are his lack of composure and really poor rebound control. I have his frame listed as a weakness here as well. His stance is quite stable, but the problem is that he prefers to play very low and wide. He can also tend to completely open it up from going so wide and allow 5-hole goals. Given his height, he should be maximizing his stance for covering the net and retaining movement as much as possible. And because of these, I see his current stance as quite inefficient. Now, where he excels is skating, athleticism, play reading, and he's the only goalie in this draft that I think his puck playing is so good that it actually adds a lot of value. Even though he's aggressive, he's also very smart with his movement. He's highly efficient, using quick, smart routes, and very positionally sound. He reacts to plays quickly, often predicting them through great tracking, and acts on them seamlessly. And when it comes to urgency and purpose, he is not lacking. He's a fierce competitor who has excelled on every possible international junior stage in his career so far, and he steals a lot of games for the gung ho Brampton Steelheads. Now, I mentioned that his OHL stats weren't amazing. He won games, but in between those wins, he wasn't a stranger to having bad games, much like Burke Hood. But unlike the Vancouver goalie, I don't see many holes in Ivan Kovic, even when he's performing poorly. I haven't quite found definitive weaknesses that are getting exploited, leading to so many of these bad games, aside from maybe his 5-hole, which he tends to open up with his poor stance, like I mentioned, or in butterfly slides. He's a bit erratic, can tend to start freaking out after letting in a couple he didn't like, but it's not so bad that I'm genuinely concerned about it in the long run. He's got a commitment to the University of Michigan for next year, which will be incredible for his development. Gives me a little more hope that he pans out than if he were to stay in junior for 2 more years. Joshua Ravensburg, the apex of goaltending for 2025. Now, I'm not one to nitpick about who you have over who as long as they're in a similar range, but Ravensburg has to be number one on anyone's board. This is the best athlete of the class, one of the best skaters with some of the best hands, an all around solid technique, pretty good play reading and tracking, and an ultimate competitor. In terms of pure raw ceiling, Ravensburgen is the best goalie we've seen since the likes of Sebastian Kosa. To be able to do all of these things at such a high level and have the height of 6'5" really shouldn't be possible. I don't necessarily like to preach that having size is such an inherently better thing than, not. But even the biggest short king supporters, such as myself, cannot deny the advantage that it will bring him. He covers a ton of net naturally, and with his huge wingspan, when he stretches out, he can reach way farther than most. The same thing can be said for his legs. The only problem with his size is that even though he's going to have a huge frame, he doesn't have great control over his body yet, giving him an somewhat inconsistent stance. It's not very stable, and his arms can flail, especially in motion. But when he has been calmer, his frame has been quite impeccable. If he were to iron out the kinks, he would
be able to make the good stance a regular thing. I'm not too concerned about this area. I see it more as room to grow, where when he should naturally improve at it, he'll be so much better than he already is. What I am concerned about with Ravensburgen is his inconsistency. At his best, Ravensburgen is a phenomenal goalie. You can always see the raw physical talent, but his technique can break, lose its structure, and he can have mental lapses in reading play and have bad rebound control. I think this inconsistency is pretty evident in his rather pedestrian numbers in the WHL this year. Talent wise, he is one of the best junior goalies in Canada, no doubt. And he can play like it too. But his game just isn't always at its best. Perhaps that is because he isn't capable of performing to his true potential on a heavy workload just yet. But since he's already being played like that workhorse, he should be able to adjust to that workload earlier than most. Goalies who don't play a heavy workload in junior hockey won't be able to do so in the NHL. It's better to struggle now and grow into it early rather than being thrust in that role for the first time in the NHL and struggle than when it's your career on the line. There's a lot of room for improvement here in Ravensburgen, but his potential is just so great. He's a lot like Yaroslav Askarov in similar abilities, weaknesses, and style. Ravensburgen should be a first rounder, especially to a team that needs a high end goalie prospect, but because of the increased uncertainty and inconsistency, he shouldn't be drafted 11th like Askarov. It takes a lot of time to develop goalies like Ravensburgen, but he's shown that he can be great or elite in nearly every meaningful aspect. And you just have to bet that he can reach that level consistently and become a Vezina caliber goalie. Otherwise, I can't see him not turning out to be at least a tandem goalie.